Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach, mates. Well, we've come to the end of our little season review for everyone. So we've got the last two teams today, which are the two West Australian sides. As per normal, I am joined by Mr. Thomas. How are you going, Thomas?
Yeah, not too bad. Interested to see how the Eagles and Freo stack up against the rest of the competition. Probably, as we said last episode when we were doing the Giants and Sun, these two sides are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. That's for sure. And we've left it last because WA are 4 hours behind than everyone else. But no, um, we'll see how we go. But as we get started, just put that up screen. So we'll start with Eagles first off for the season review. Gave them an F. I just don't think they lived up to any sort of expectation. I know that they've been probably cruelly done by with injury and whatnot in previous years, but it's one of those things where you just got to look at the list of what they have and what they could have had. They had Reid, obviously, and Yo back to career best form this year, but still just really struggled to do anything significant. Finished on 16th. Their best result was an impressive 10-point win against the Suns later in the season. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles, and do you think they can pounce back in 2025?
Yeah, well, I've actually got some optimism that they can bounce back. Obviously, we'll probably get into the stats and stuff, but yeah, the eye test it might be a little bit deceiving with the Eagles. I just yeah, I think the F is probably a little bit harsh. Normally, I'm the harsh one.
Yeah.
But I think once I go through, you might change your opinion. I don't know if you will, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I think I think there has been improvements this year from West Coast, but yeah, obviously I guess their biggest issue is keeping their best players consistently fit and on the park, because when they are on the park, they make such a difference to this West Coast side and the way that they play. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see with a few new players coming in, Liam Baker, Matt Owies, and that's it. And then just the loss of Barras would be interesting just to sort of see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have optimism for West Coast supporters that hopefully the worst is over. And they can look forward to gradually rebuilding as the
Yeah.
years go on.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think they have a really good couple young players. I think it's all about player retention for the Eagles. They lost a lot. They probably didn't draft that smartly when they won that premiership back in 2018. So it's one of those things where, yeah, it's probably hurt them later as the years progressed post 2018. But as we move over to stats that matter for the Eagles, what are the underlying stats for the Eagles? Because as we say, with the eye test, they didn't really look good at all. We'll talk about their list in a minute with our prediction for the best 22. There's some holes there, clearly, with Barras and Darling in particular, the two that have left from key position stocks. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles' underlying stats?
Yeah, well, I'll start off with the raw stats. So the raw stats are basically all red, which means they're all in the bottom six against all the other teams. Which when you finish 16th is probably to be expected. But then if you have a look at what they did last year, or sorry, 2023 versus what they did this year, there are a lot of greens, which generally means that they've improved across the course of the year more so than any other side, which is probably to be expected given that they were basically as far below as they could in 2023. So I guess if we just have a look here, so they were able to get the ball inside 50 more times this year than what they did last year. As I said, it's still bottom six across both years. But if you compare last year with this year, there has been obviously there's been a massive improvement just in terms of that plus differential. So second best overall differential, as in what they got the ball inside 50 versus what they let the opposition get inside 50. So second overall. Only Essendon had a greater, plus minus differential. Scores from stoppage, which again I don't really value that much as being a premiership sort of model, but they were minus 31 points in 2023, and this year they were only minus 13.3. So that's 17 points. They've improved on that, which is number one by a long way. Even their turnover game, it didn't come as much as their stoppage game, but it was still top 6 overall differential. And then the other area that West Coast sort of improved on was their ability to score from the front half. So last year, their overall differential was minus 29 points. So essentially, that's 5 goals a game that they were, conceding more to the opposition. And then this year, it was only minus, what have we got here? Minus 11.7, which gives them a plus 18 overall differential. So, yes, the eye test says that they did poorly. But then if you have a look at what they did in 2023 and 2024, there is significant improvement. And as I touched on with the Richmond podcast, the only thing I'm really looking at West Coast at the minute is what their percentage is doing. And this year it was plus 15.1%. So 2023, they were 53%. 2024, they were 68.1%. So if that can keep improving, I think that will be the sign for West Coast supporters that their team is improving. But yeah, obviously a massive part of that is keeping all of their best players fit, healthy, and on the field.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think, look, they had a dreaded run over that COVID period, which made it really awkward for them previous years, and hopefully it's better moving on to 2025. But their best 22 as predicted at the moment, obviously these predictions don't really mean overly much. It's our prediction based off the trade period itself. And without the draft picks, obviously West Coast will get draft picks come through. Their first one being in the top 12, which is a bit of a controversial thing in itself, which we'll touch on later. But looking at their current side, going from the back, as I said, if you're an audio listener, we'll read it through. If you're on YouTube, just obviously look at the screen. Liam Duggan, Harry Edwards, Brady Hoff, Jaden Hunt, Jeremy McGovern, and Ruben Ginby. That lineup was pretty much what it was in round 23, by a few omissions, obviously Barras being one of them. Tim Kelly, Jack Graham, Jack Petruccelli, I think probably moves on to a wing. Jamie Cripps, Oscar Allen, Liam Baker, obviously from the Lions. He could probably play in the midfield as well, but probably as a high half forward, rotating as well. Liam Ryan, Jake Waterman, Matty Owies probably locks up a pressure for small forward role. The followers, Matty Flynn, when he gets his body right. Elliot Yeo, Harley Reid, an interchange bench, Campbell Chesser, Tom Cole, Clayton Hall, BJ Williams. Obviously, he was the primary ruck at the time when Flynn was injured, but I could easily see them playing both rucks just because of how poor they are in that stock. So I don't really have a dominant ruckman regardless. What are your thoughts on that lineup there, Nathan? Is anyone that you would swap in and out depending on what you saw this season?
No, I don't think so, but there are definitely holes in that lineup. Just having a look at that on face, the eye test, as we like to call it. The eye test says that there probably are a few gaps there that perhaps they need to bridge to get to the better sides.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, I don't know, probably the bottom, probably that interchange bench. I don't know if that's going to be, contending anytime soon. But if you have a look at if you actually have a look at the best 18, like on the field, I don't actually think that's too bad a lineup. I just think it's the next 4 players that are coming in that are going to be the problem for West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that gets fixed through drafting or through, trades in another year, but yeah, that 18 actually doesn't look too bad on paper. It's just the next 4 coming in where I think the problem is for West Coast. So that first set of rotation, if you will.
Yeah, their depth is really poor, and it's been tested, time and time again this year. Harry Edwards as a fullback is probably not the answer moving forward, but their forward line, like if you look at that in isolation, and their midfield, it's very, very good. As you said, the only issues are once those star players get injured, the next in line aren't the best for sure. But hopefully the trade-ins will help that help that rotation and help that depth a little bit as well. But their trade-ins now, this was obviously well publicised. Liam Baker in, there was big controversy around that. Pick mainly from West Coast supporters not being too happy that they lost pick 3 essentially to Carlton, and essentially was it Liam Baker was their pick 3, and then the next is pick 12. So I would like to get your opinion on that, Nath. Jack Graham, I think he's really important in for them. He provides that grunt, provides help for Yo big time. I think Reid at times just as young and as talented he is, he kind of got overawed by better players, or not better players, more seasoned players. We definitely know how good Reid is. Matty always, I think, fills a void as a small pressure forward. Could get a game at Carlton. Will probably get locked up a spot pretty quickly at the Eagles. And then the big outs for the Eagles, Tom Barras is a big out. He saved their ass, I think, multiple occasions at fullback. And then Jack Darling, as much as he probably wasn't batting his best footy towards the back end of this year, I could see him doing pretty well at North if he gets a game, and it's kind of unfortunate to lose someone like Darling who can kind of coach and mentor the likes of Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman. But I think on the flip side, probably those 2 key forwards for the Eagles are ready to go with regards to taking that next step into kind of that elite category. What's your main thoughts on Baker in particular? Is he kind of overs or unders, and who won that trade essentially with West Coast?
Yeah, well, I'll start off. The eye test says that West Coast have probably improved their list. Darling was probably on that outer anyway. I feel like it's Allen and Waterman's forward line now, and I think Darling was probably third forward at best. Barras is going to be a massive loss. But I feel like West Coast will back themselves in that they can get McGovern's body right, because I think McGovern was the one that was doing a lot of the intercept marking and the rebounding anyway, and Barras was more of the lockdown sort of fullback, if you will. So that will be interesting, sort of how that works out. But just quickly touching on, so I don't know. I can see why West Coast traded pick 3, because I feel like that they think their list is perhaps perhaps better than what the eye test says from our perspective. But I definitely think that losing pick 3 on face value is a massive risk. Just given how far back they are. So to basically give up, I don't know what it ended up being. I think it ended up being Owies, and that all that pick sort of got swapped in. Owies, I think, was in that. Baker was in that, and then I think pick 3 went out the window, and a few other picks were all done in that deal. I think overall West Coast just need the ready-made players now, as opposed to more draft picks. So I think in the end, I think they'll say that yes, we might have given up pick 3, but we got 2 players who we have faith in can be, leaders forward. And I guess they're known commodities, whereas pick 3, you might be talking about, like a Jack Billings or a Paddy McCartan or, someone like that. Yes, I am picking on St Kilda draft picks. That are an unknown commodity. Their body might break down. They might only last a few years and then, be medically retired. Although I guess that's any player at the minute. So I guess West Coast will back themselves in. But yeah, on face value, I think pick 3 is a massive loss. But then again, if they're trying to recruit West Australian players, I don't think they're expecting the first sort of WA players to go until around about their first pick anyway. So perhaps that was their other train of thought was let's move back. But move in a position where we can still sort of get that West Australian talent in. So, yeah, I just think that the main thing for West Coast is I just needed A-grade players. So I think they'll say Baker comes straight in, Graham comes straight in, always goes straight into their side as well, and it improves them on paper. Which, as I said, is probably more what they need as opposed to draft picks to be competitive. So, yes, it is a massive gamble, but I think it's one that they'll back themselves into, say that they're probably, at least broken even with that, just based on where their list is.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that one. It's pretty concisely put together. I think, yeah, time will tell in particular with whether Baker will shine or not. And I think he does provide a really good opportunity for himself and also to push in that midfield and really make a permanent namesake for himself. And moving towards the player focus, it'll be on Baker. I think that's the main one that I've got. He scored 140 Supercoach points versus Port Adelaide. He was a kind of discussion point for the for the Tigers, Supercoach wise in Classic at times. But I think the biggest problem with him was consistency's sake. Just really never got going with regards to his scoring consistency. Just quickly bringing up his scores from this season. You look at that 140 in isolation, that was his highest score back in round 2. And since then, he posted 1, 2, 3, 4 tons out of primarily missed a handful of games, but didn't miss too many. But his floor was also quite poor as well. He'd pump out the odd 60 and just never really got going. Obviously, on the flip side, you look at Richmond and how weak they were this season on the Wooden Spooners. That may have played a part. Do you reckon he becomes a star mid at the Eagles? Or do you reckon, on the flip side of it all, it probably is a wasted trade to some regards for not using his full potential? Or do you think the Eagles are good enough and have good enough players around that they can use his full potential as that kind of mid-forward rotation and really utilising his speed and elite kind of foot skills to get the ball inside 50 and damage around stoppage as well?
Yeah, he'd be frustrating to own. You wouldn't know where he'd play from week to week. I mean, at Richmond, one week he was a half back, next week he was a half forward. Then, even in game, he'd be flicked around from, the back line into the midfield. So at Richmond, he was a Mr. Fix-It, if you will. I don't know if that will continue at West Coast. So I think you can only really go based on what you know. So perhaps this is one that I think you're going to have to keep your eye on over the preseason. So any WA media or West Coast supporters who actually go and watch the Eagles train, give us an update on where he's playing. Because if he's playing all across the park like he was at Richmond, I would probably say you'd probably be crazy to pick him, given you're probably going to get more, more of what he's delivered so far. But I'm just having a look here. The one that I actually don't mind a bit of a look at is the kid himself, Harley Reid. I think if he maintains that forward eligibility, I'm not sure if he's going to, but I think if he maintains that forward eligibility, he gets another preseason under his belt. He gets more help in the midfield. I wouldn't put it past him to push that average from 80.6 sort of, up around the 90 to 95 mark. And given what the forwards delivered this year, I don't think he's actually too bad a pick. So, and then the other one obviously is Tim Cully. Again, the issue with Tim Cully is his body. But yeah, I think realistically speaking, probably the only one in Classic that I would probably look at this stage. The only two I would look at this stage are probably Kelly or Reid. McGovern, if he can get his body right, could be an option. But I had McGovern in draft. He was an absolute star. But there was always, I guess, the risk factor of his body breaking down. And then in draft, obviously, you don't have the worry of, you've only got 30 trades, so you don't have to worry about, the in, out nature. But I guess the thing with McGovern is he's a proven scorer. It is just a matter of getting him on the park. So, I think there are a few Supercoach options that I would probably pick ahead of Liam Baker. But yeah, as I said, if he can nail down a role somewhere and it is a sort of a more friendlier role rather than a Mr. Fix-It, he might come into consideration. But yeah, at this stage, I think you've just got to go off, you've just got to base your opinions off what we know, and that is that he is currently a bit of a Mr. Fix-It, where he can sort of play everywhere. And I don't think that bodes well for Supercoach. But yeah, as I said, if there's any WA media or West Coast diehards that go and watch them train, and he does nail a position, please let us know, because that might change my thoughts on Liam Baker.
Yeah, no, you are right. He was a little bit all over the shop with regards to what he was playing at the Tigers. And look, for the Eagles themselves, McGovern and Reid were really only the two relevant players. Yo was definitely a good pick at the start of the season, but
I forgot about Yo.
Yeah, eventually. And I think that's just injury and that classic kind of conversation about good players playing in average sides, and just when they get belted, every player just scores poorly. Gov was one of those ones that was a bit of an outlier where, I owned him for the majority of the season and just never really looked like scoring poorly, which was quite impressive. But yeah, Baker's one to watch a preseason, because if he can get that third mid rotation, potentially, as I said, push Tim Kelly out to a half forward or a wing, then all of a sudden he looks like a good player, because he's going to play 22 or 24 games regardless. But now moving on to the Freo Dockers, so the flip side of Perth. A much more positive outlook, I guess, on first of all, maybe not their season where they finished, but their trade period, which we'll get into in a little bit. Definitely dominated that scene and got the player they wanted. Finished at 10th. Best result was 11-point win versus Sydney. They look like playing finals for the majority of the year, but just really never got going in parts. I don't know what's wrong with Freo, but yeah, gave them a C+. I think they were probably a little bit unlucky with results not going their way as well. As we all know, I'm pretty sure it was that last game of the season where they played against Port, didn't get the job done. That cost them finals. So a bit unfortunate there. What are your quick thoughts on Freo's 2024 season?
Yeah, I think you've graded them too highly here, to be honest. I think C plus. I think is very generous with what I'm about to go through, because the eye test said that there was some unlucky results, but then you actually dig a little bit deeper, and realistically, they really should have been playing finals. So the fact that they didn't play finals, they finished below Collingwood. They had a better. I'm just gonna say it now, just before I get into it. They had a better stat profile than Collingwood, and they finished below them. So the fact that they didn't make finals, doesn't bode well for them. But yeah, the eye test said that there was the game that they played definitely stacked up. You just look at that Sydney game. I think they had the Collingwood game when they came back from 25 points, even if it was in perhaps unique and controversial circumstances. But yeah, they were probably one of the more consistent sides throughout the year, who I guess unfortunately just fell away at the wrong time of the year, and it cost them a final spot. But yeah, I think if I was a Fremantle supporter, I'd probably be disappointed on the year overall, but optimistic about what you can do next year with a few, extra players in there who might be able to help fix perhaps some of the, I guess, flaws that may have hampered them in the back half of the year. But yeah, I guess time will tell on that. But yeah, I think I had Fremantle probably a D, maybe D plus, D minus. So
yeah,
I guess we were about the same mark. But yeah, I guess because I've got the benefit of the stats in front of me, yeah, perhaps my gradings have been a little bit different just based on that. But yeah, I think overall their best was good enough, but they just didn't do it consistently enough, I suppose.
Yeah, I think consistency was the key. They will look at their predicted 2025 lineup minus draft picks, and I think they've got definite talent across the board, with a few key players going down late in the season, which really hurt them, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But as Nathan said, the underlying stats for Freo may not have been as strong as what the eye test suggested. What are your thoughts there, Nathan, on what they have, what they provided in 2024, and where they can improve on in next season, and hopefully for their sake and their supporters, get a finals berth.
Yeah, well, I'll start off with the base of stuff, which is a turnover game. So top 6 in a turnover game, which is a massive, massive tick. Realistically, if you finish in top 6 in a turnover game, you probably should be playing finals, if I'm being honest. You look at the other 5 sides in there. So Brisbane, Carlton, Sydney, Dogs, Hawthorn all played finals. And then Fremantle were the only side in the top 6 who missed out. If you go back to 2023, the only side who didn't play didn't play finals was Adelaide from the top 6. And even that was in controversial circumstances. Because, obviously they had the goal umpiring decision go against them, which if that went the right way, they probably would have played finals and kicked Sydney out. I think overall I'd be disappointed in that. Best clearance side across the year. Top 6 in contested possession differential. So a lot of their contest stuff, which was probably, I guess, their main area of concern in 2023, they fixed up in 2024. The scores against from turnovers, so top 3 in that, which is a massive tick, but they weren't able to really capitalize themselves on turnover. They were only sort of mid-table in that. And then the one that might surprise a few people is actually their ability to move the ball off the back half line. So they were top 6 in scores from their own back half, and then they were top 6 at defending full ground transition, which obviously I guess we've become accustomed to with Fremantle. So I guess for them, it's just working out how they can get this offensive game going, which it did seem towards the back half of last year they got it going. Perhaps that is a positive, if you will, that there is a clear area now they need to identify, which is their offensive game. Because their defensive game, they're basically top 6 in every single defensive stat. That I've been tracking: top 6 in scores from turnover, top 6 in scores against from back half, top 6 in scores against from front half. They were sort of only mid-table in scores against from stoppage, but inside 50s against, they were top 6 at stopping the opposition getting the ball inside their own 50. So I guess the other thing with Fremantle too is they went away from this fake football, which if you listen to David King and Daniel Hoyne, the fake football is basically the high uncontested marking game, when instead of defending properly, you defend with the ball in hand, which once they actually went away from that, they sort of came with a bit of a rush in the back half of the year. So I guess that's the side forward for Fremantle, is moving away from that fake football and into more of this, more modern, chaotic game style. But we might touch on the few extra players they've got. But if those few extra players can come in and help sort of that profile shift, all the talents there on the paper. They've got the clearance game and the contested possession game to support probably, making a run next year as well. If they can just fix their offensive game, they'll be flying for 2025. So that's probably where I'm going to be looking at for Fremantle, is what they're actually doing with the ball in hand. Because their defensive game is really strong. It's just that they can't do anything themselves. So, I guess that's probably where I'm looking at for Fremantle in 2025.
Yeah, look, I mean, I saw him live a couple of times, one of which was against St Kilda, and I think the biggest problem they had, for me personally speaking, their midfield is dominant. We'll talk about that and touch base on that in a minute. I reckon they've got one of the top 5 midfield brigades in the competition. However, you are right, their transition inside 50, I think, really struggles when they do lose their keys. And, their key forwards, they just don't really click. You've got Jackson obviously there playing forward. I think there's another question mark altogether whether he's best suited as a permanent ruck or a centre half forward or a full forward, because he really didn't shine at all when he was playing key forward. But yeah, that's definitely something to think of for next year. But looking at their 2025 predicted lineup, again, as we stress, this isn't draft pick related. So we'll touch base on draft picks and top 10 draft picks moving towards the draft. But at the moment, this is just without the draft picks, as they have not yet been decided. Going from the back half, and as Nathan touched on, a really, really strong back half. Luke Ryan, Alex Pearce, Brennan Cox, Jordan Clark, Heath Chapman, Brandon Walker. Yeah, I think that's a pretty strong back six. The unfortunate part for Freo was when, likes of Alex Pearce and Brennan Cox went down for the majority of the season. Matt Johnson was a revelation really for them, providing a lot of speed through that midfield. I think he can play on a wing as well. Hayden Young, really impressive grunt work inside, plays that defensive mid work as well. Jeremy Sharp on the other wing, he was a star, I think, for the Freo Dockers, coming over from the Gold Coast Suns, and wasn't really given an opportunity there, but relished in that wing role, just runs for days, doesn't stop, hard worker. And their forward line, and as Nathan said, this is probably where it falls apart a little bit. Sam Switkowski, Luke Jackson playing dual ruck with Sean Darcy, Nat Fyfe when he's fit. Shai Bolton, I think, is going to be a really, really important talking point moving forward if he can relish that opportunity in WA. Jai Miss, really impressive youngster, and Josh Tracy as well. I think he's one that was sadly missed when he was injured at the back end of last season. Their followers, one of the best in competition, or their midfield group in Sean Darcy, Caleb Strong, Andy Brayshaw, two of the best young mids going around. Their interchange bench, again, maybe similar to West Coast, not as poor, but in the fact that their bottom six players aren't as strong. Yago Mira played wing midfield back end of last season. Nathan O'Driscoll is probably a good wing replacement. Michael Frederick playing that forward role, and then Josh Draper. I just put his name in because he played some games as a defensive rotation. What's your thoughts on that 22 or 22? And is there anyone else that you think can come in and do a role?
No, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I think you've got all the main players there, and I guess the interchange players. I guess we should probably say as well, the interchange players are probably more the subjective part of the team. I think the best 18 is probably the main area where you probably want to look at for most clubs. And yeah, like West Coast, I think that best 18 is probably up there, probably higher than West Coast. You're probably looking, top 8, top 6 worthy. But yeah, the bottom sort of interchange bench does fall away quite quickly. So they've probably got the same problem as West Coast, as you touched on. Probably not as bad as West Coast, in that the first rotation there is a noticeable drop off. So I guess that's probably going to be an area that going forward, what they work on to improve that. But yeah, as I said, this side basically, other than the injured players Cox and Pearce, it basically got them to within having a shot at finals on their own boot. So the talent is there. It's just now, can they put it all together, especially in the front half, which probably was the most impacted by injury. So perhaps that was a little bit misleading, those stats, but again, the stats don't lie. Obviously Fyfe was out a lot. Tracy missed the back half of the year. Switkowski is really underrated as a player. He always ranks really highly on Champion Data's ratings for a general forward. Yeah, I guess that's going to be the area for Fremantle, as I said, is what their forward line looks like. But yeah, overall on paper, that is very, very strong, that lineup.
Yeah, I think they provide a lot of excitement, and Bolton's, I think, a big plus for them and provides a need both forward and midfield. But yeah, as we talked about, one of their big trade-ins was Shai Bolton. Did pay up for him, but I think that was always going to happen. Not many other trades. That's why the top 5 looks pretty grim. I had to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel to find some information there. But yeah, they get pick 14 and pick 30. So still solid draft picks coming in, can do some damage, and they lose Matt Taberner and Ethan Hughes delisted. Don't think there's going to be much problems there losing those two. Taberner really got outdone by the likes of Jaimis coming in, Josh Tracy, Luke Jackson playing forward. I think the big talking point here is Shai Bolton. He's very, very up and down, and we'll talk about him more Supercoach related in a little bit. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, on him coming into Freo? And do you reckon he changes that dynamic in the midfield, or do you reckon he plays a lot more stay-at-home forward for the Dockers? And do you reckon that helps that he helps that transition, moving that ball forward? Because as we all know, with the line, when he was playing at the Tigers, he had no problem at all. Opening up a game and dominating, but was very quiet in patches. Do you reckon that changes the Dockers, or do you reckon, we're probably not going to see the best at Freo?
I wouldn't go as far as saying that you're not going to see the best of him. But he is a known commodity now, so unfortunately that's just who he is. He has blinded games and then he has quiet games. So I guess it's how Fremantle, navigate the quiet games with him. Do they perhaps move him up into the midfield to get him going, or whatnot? But I think pick 6 and pick 11 or whatever they gave up. I think that was what they gave up, wasn't it? Something like that. Pick 10 and pick 12 or so. I know it was two sort of mid first round picks.
Yeah.
I just wonder if that perhaps might backfire in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's necessarily worth that much. I guess the only reason they probably paid that much is because he was contracted still. So I think at this stage on paper, I'm going to probably say Richmond are going to win that trade. As I said, even though I know Shai Bolton is a known product, I just think that where Richmond are to get those 2 extra first round draft picks in, as well as what they got from Gold Coast, I think just sets them up for the next 8 to 10 years. And I think if they can nail those draft picks, I think they'll end up doing a lot better than what Shai Bolton will at Fremantle. I guess the only thing that might change that is if they can somehow get Bolton into a full-time sort of midfield role, like a Rankin or someone like that. But at this stage, I just can't see that happening. So, I think they've paid, in my opinion, they've probably paid slight overs for him for his output. But I guess you can't deny that the talent's there. So it's just how consistent is he? Do you want a Bolton who's winning 10 games and missing 12, or do you want a Bolton that's dead consistent in all 24 games? So I guess that's what Fremantle and their supporters are going to have to weigh up, is sort of where do they want him? Do they want him being outstanding and quiet, or they just want him meeting a baseline every week? I guess that's probably it. And then, obviously because they got rid of the 2 first round picks, they obviously didn't have they didn't have a lot of other priorities to get in. So I think that's where basically Fremantle are. I think they feel like their list is ready to explode. It's just a matter now of putting it all together and getting the best out of these players, especially when they move the ball forward. So it'd be an interesting watch Fremantle actually for 2025.
No, they definitely will be exciting. I think they're probably, bar the talk about Hawthorn, I think Freo are probably the talk of the town come next season with regards to excitement. I think they'll be a very exciting team to watch. I think Bolton provides that energy that they've been lacking, and they did provide viewers very exciting footy all the way to the end, until they kind of fell apart a little bit just at the wrong time against Port Adelaide in that final game of the round. But moving on to our player focus, I think I've picked Shai Bolton. Nathan can attest to this or choose someone different in a minute. But 133 Supercoach points versus St Kilda. This was in gather round. He tore that apart. 4 goals, 4 tackles, 19 disposed. We all know his talent. He's an amazing freak show of a player inside that forward 50. Do you reckon round 1 he plays as a mid or a forward? Because that's a big conversation Supercoach-wise. Because if he plays as a forward, probably not a pick, but as a midfielder and as a starting mid, playing through that mid rotation could be very damaging and probably what the Dockers need. I know Matt Johnson played through that role quite extensively to provide some leg speed, because Brayshaw and Sarong don't really provide as much, and they provide different avenues to stoppages. But what's your thoughts on that, Nath?
Yeah, well, I guess this is probably in the Liam Baker discussion is I guess this probably is going to decide for a lot of people is where he's lining up. Is if he's a small forward, you probably pass on him. If he's a midfielder, um, he probably does come into more consideration. Um, he's probably not the type of player I would probably go for in Classic. I feel like he's probably more of a draft player. Um, because I suppose in Classic you probably want more of the consistent baseline, 105, 110 pretty much every week. Whereas in draft, it's probably not as important for that type of player. Um, just because the draft typically, it yo-yos anyway, because obviously you've got a much wider pool to pick from. So sometimes if in draft, if you've got a player like Bolton, if you've got another couple of more consistent players, you can sort of make up for it. But in Classic, he's probably but he's probably not someone I would be interested in at this stage. I mean, obviously, my player focus, probably would be on Bolton as well, just sort of what impact he has. But I think for Supercoach Classic wise, I think it'd be hard to look past Sarong and Brayshaw. I think they're going to lead Fremantle forward for the next, 5 to 10 years. Hopefully they'll guide them into that maiden premiership. Whenever that will be. But yeah, obviously. Yeah, this is a massive watch. Is what happens with Bolton. So again, if there's any West Australian media or Fremantle supporters that go and watch them train, please let us know where he's lining up in the training drills and in the pracky matches, because I think that will be the deciding factor for a lot of coaches is sort of where he is lining up.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think, we both look at Baker and Bolton, and they're both were very volatile at the Tigers. But as we said, there was probably external factors with regards to that one there. With Richmond really not showing much in 2024, and you look at Bolton in particular playing in a team like Fremantle, which has got superstars all around him, probably a player that will really benefit from the likes of Brayshaw and Sarong and Jackson feeding the ball to him a lot more. And I could see those blow up games where he does score 130, 140 and have 4 goals really shine through. And he probably has as much pressure to be. He's obviously the key draft or the key trade pillar for the Dockers, but coming from that Melbourne footy hub might be a good change for him, that's for sure. But that's all for the SC clubs for 2024. Hopefully you enjoyed our reviews for the clubs. I know that myself and Nate did those ones together. All the other clubs that we haven't touched on as a pair, we've done with other guests from the Supercoach fraternity. Just head over to our YouTube channel to listen to those ones, or on Podbean and Spotify as well. But moving forward, we probably will look towards a draft come November, probably do an episode around the top 10. And also we'll sneak in an episode between now and the draft as well on kind of not a recap of the trade period, but kind of our top 10 with regards to kind of grading the trade period for Supercoach wise, or how those players that are traded are relevant to Supercoach in 2025. So you like some McRae, Bolton, who else? Bailey Smith as well, and
Houston.
how those, Houston, Perryman. So list goes on, but how they will fare in their new clubs or new stripes, and how that will impact their Supercoach relevancy in 2025. But other than that, have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you for the next one.